Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May has been out and about this morning. She's been in Downing Street for a series of meetings, but last night the Prime Minister was in Bolton, where she tried out some of the campaign lines we'll be hearing a lot of in the next few weeks.
Now, there's a very clear choice at this election. It's a choice between strong and stable leadership under the Conservatives or weak and unstable coalition of chaos led by Jeremy Corbyn. And that is very clear. Let's look, the other parties are lining up to prop up Jeremy Corbyn. We've seen it with the Liberal Democrats, and we see it with Nicola Sturgeon's Scottish nationalists.
Theresa May there, she was speaking in Bolton, a part of the north of Lancashire, where the Conservatives are hoping to pick up a few seats, particularly if they think the UKIP threat isn't what it was. So that's the reason why she went there. I remember in the old days in black and white TV, it was Bolton East, Bolton West. In these days, we're always swing seats, which way they went. It used to be which way the country went. These are changed days, of course, now. We're joined by David Cameron's former Deputy Chief of Staff, the Conservative MP Oliver Dowden, and by Alistair Carmichael, the Liberal Democrats' Home Affairs spokesperson and the only Lib Dem MP in Scotland. Indeed. Correct? Well, there you go, a distinction.
For the moment.
For the moment. We shall see if we can say the same after June the 8th. What do you make of Mr Corbyn's attempts to stand up to the wealth extractors?
I mean, look, it's interesting stuff, but it's quite remarkable that in an election which is framed around Brexit, which that is clearly the defining issue, at least at the moment, Jeremy Corbyn had very little to say about it. And my instinct is that actually I think it was probably quite a good move on his part to try and shift the terms on, because on Brexit he's got a pretty weak story to tell.
Right,
he was absent without leave during the referendum campaign, and he, you know, his leadership, so-called, over Article 50 has been pitiful.
But it is not necessary, simply because the Prime Minister calls the election on a particular issue as the dominant issue. It isn't necessary for the Leader of the Opposition to have to go on with that. Mr Corbyn said this morning that the crash caused by the financial system and by the institutions of the financial system caused huge hardship for people who weren't responsible for the crash. And people are still suffering to some extent on that, and living standards and so on, whereas the people who caused it seem by and large to get away scot-free. Surely that's a legitimate point and worth campaigning on.
Of course it's a legitimate point, and it is worth campaigning on, but there is a danger for any political party that wants to talk about something other than the debate that is at the centre of
he wants to talk about the living standards of the British people. What could be more important?
Well, I mean, look, in that case, then it does bring us right back round to Brexit, because, yes, although Jeremy Corbyn was talking about, you know, an interesting analysis of the past, what is going to have an impact on the living standards of working people in this country in the here and now and in the future, and it will be Theresa May's determination to pursue a hard Brexit, taking us out of the single market, taking us out of the customs union.
The Ed Miliband talked about predators in his first speech, as I think it was his leader to the Labour Party conference. It was in Liverpool. I remember being there. Predators and producers. One was good, one was bad. Theresa May has talked about tax dodgers, international companies of directors who are not paying their fair share or doing things wrongly. She divided people into that as well. Mr Corbyn's just doing the same. There's a direct line from this. There's nothing unusual about it.
Well, I think it's perfectly legitimate for Jeremy Corbyn to raise this issue, but I've always thought the way to help working people is to cut their taxes. And actually, if you look at what we've managed to do, we've cut people's taxes by £1,000 a year by increasing the personal allowance. And at the same time, actually, the wealthy are paying more than ever.
And who was it that forced you to do that, first of all, Oliver? Can we just remember that?
Well, we found the money to do it. You can come up with many ideas. We had the plan that found the money to do it. It was a Conservative policy as well. It's in our manifesto.
Well, let me put this to you then, because it plays, it's an example. Mr Corbyn and Mr Dromney didn't use it, but it's an example, I think, of what they were talking about. In the financial year for Google, ending June 2016, they had a turnover in Britain of $8 billion. $8 billion. How much corporation tax did they pay?
Well, Google are paying more now than they used to. I don't know the exact figure that they paid.
All right, well, I'll tell you. 25 million.
Yeah.
So they paid 25 million on a turnover of 8 billion. That cannot be right, can it?
No, I completely agree. It's
so
not
why
right.
is it happening under this government?
We're starting to deal with this. So, for example, George Osborne introduced reforms of the rules to deal with the so-called double Irish question. The main problem we have here is that large multinational companies are moving money around the world. They're taking it as licence fees, taking the tax in other countries.
No, we know what they're doing. What we're trying to work out is why you haven't stopped them. Well, this is 6 years of Conservative government, and they're still paying a marginal rate of tax on now, of course, corporation tax is on profits, but we know that you can massage profits. But a company that has made £8 billion out of this country in 1 year pays 25 million in tax. That's why people are angry, is it not?
Yes, and people are right to be angry.
Why have you not done so?
What we have done about it is we're tackling the double Irish question. We've raised billions in from tax avoidance. We just in this last budget we announced a further £800 million from tax avoidance. We're closing down loopholes. We're going after tax evaders with higher fines. We're more aggressively tackling tax avoidance. And I think if you look at what the Prime Minister said, if you go back to what she said on the steps of Downing Street, that is something that she wants to address further. And this is why it's so important that she gets a clear mandate at this election so that she's able to drive those reforms through.
You're writing the UK manifesto. What are you going to say about these things?
About inequality, about...
about some of the various biggest companies who do well out of Britain. They're popular companies with consumers, but they seem to pay very small amounts of corporation tax.
Absolutely, and we had in our 2015 manifesto ways in which to cut down on corporate tax avoidance, which in fact the Tories actually picked up and ran with themselves, and we'll be looking into more of that too. But for us, you know, UKIP is very much a party of low taxation. We believe fundamentally that taxpayers should be able to keep as much of their own money in their pockets as possible. So we're always looking to that.
Even if it's Google.
We're looking to smaller government as well, and I think it's one of the things that's interesting is, you know, May's government is very much a party of big government. She's talking about more politics, not less. That's something that we oppose as well. Of course, one of the big things for us too is immigration. Mass uncontrolled immigration has driven down wages. By controlling immigration, you get a natural rise in wages.
There's another dimension to all this, and neither Oliver or Suzanne are wanting to talk about it. And it's actually the truth of the matter that you will only tackle corporate tax evasion of this sort in a globalised economy by cooperating with other people in other parts of the world. The EU was one of the most significant trading blocks within that globalised economy.
Can I just... I think words have to be careful. You're not accusing Google of evasion.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about...
but that was the word you used.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Avoidance. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to put that correct. But, you know, corporate tax avoidance, closing down the loopholes can only be done by working with other countries. And the EU is an important...
But doesn't the OECD pay the major part in this?
Well, yes, of course they do. But
that sets the global rules.
If the whole thrust of your politics is, as it is now being driven by Suzanne and her colleagues, an inward-looking and isolationist politics,
Come on, we're
then
global
in fact
in our
that
vision.
becomes more and more
spinning
difficult.
Everything.
And can I just challenge you on the EU? Actually, I think the central role is played not only by the OECD but the G7. And again, we've made tremendous progress through the G7 at looking at tackling tax avoidance. I don't think the EU has that big a role to play on tax avoidance.
The EU actually helps facilitate it by being members of the European Union. Companies can decide to base their headquarters in countries that have the lowest tax regimes. We would stop that.
What would the Lib Dems do about inequality?
But inequality, we tackle it, as Oliver suggested there, by starting with allowing working people to keep more money in...
But a lot of that's been done already.
Well, a lot of it has been done, but there's still a lot more to do. And actually what you do then is you use the machinery of government to give people the tools to pull themselves up. So we invest in education, we invest in the pupil premium, which puts direct money, extra money directly into children who come from the poorer families. That way you enable them to make the most of the talents that they have got and to pull themselves out of poverty.
You up for a progressive alliance?
Well, if there are progressives around with whom you can make an alliance, then I'm up for it.
Mr.
But frankly,
Corbyn?
I'm not seeing it. I don't think there's much that we could have an alliance with as far as Jeremy Corbyn's concerned, because there's any alliance has got to be a coherent one, and no alliance with Jeremy Corbyn is going to be coherent. As for the nationalists, as you well know, they are neither progressive nor are they particularly keen on making alliances with other people. That's just a little bit of mischief making from the SNP there, I think.
It is, okay, and not from yourself.
Oh no, heaven forfend.
We'll leave it
you know
there
me
before there's any more mischief. Thank you very much.